Hello everyone, welcome to the third webinar of our four-part What is New for Operator 10 and Synexus webinar series, where we have been exploring all the new design and feature changes in our updated version of Operator 10 and Synexus version 11.24. I'm Shane in technical support. I'll be conducting this webinar today. In this third webinar, we will be continuing with our exploration of the new report center in Operator 10 and Synexus. Specifically, this webinar is going to focus on producing your reports, setting up the properties of your reports, and implementing calculations inside those reports. So I want to go ahead and get started here. And we're going to go and navigate to our Operator 10 program, which I have open here. And then we're going to go to our View tab in the application ribbon, and we're going to launch our reporting section. And I'll expand that so we can see that a little more clearly here. And from our reporting section, last time we discussed the design features that have been implemented in the new reporting section. We've also discussed creating your folders and creating report sets. What we'll focus on in the first part of this webinar is producing your reports, how to produce the reports, and then we'll proceed with setting up those reports. But first I'm going to take a look at producing your reports inside Operator 10 and Synexus. So initially you have a couple methods for producing your reports once they're set up inside the program. You'll note that we can select a folder and produce a report set. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select a particular report set I have defined. And in this report set, I've set up some blank DMRs, which will work hand in hand with our illustration on how to set up reports. So you'll get a feel for what the report forms look like for state DMRs. So we can click on that. When you click on any report set icon, you will be greeted in the new program by a Produce Reports window. This is different than how you produced reports previously in other versions of the program. In this Produce Reports window, it's going to ask for your reporting date. So you can go ahead and enter a reporting date for the month that you're reporting. You can type that in manually by typing out the full date, or you can shortcut it by just typing the month and the year. You can also use our calendar if you're more comfortable with that, and you can navigate to whatever report month that you're reporting for. Now in our sample database, I'm going to be using November because that's where most of my data is. So we can do that. Once we've selected our report date, we can fetch data. So this is a fetch data button. This is a new application feature. When you select that button, what it's doing is it's fetching all the data from your database to populate your reports, and it's performing any required calculations that have been set up on that report. Once it's completed doing that, it will change the status to OK here. You'll see that you now have a green OK status for all of the reports that I have in this particular report set. Once you've done that, you have the option of selecting specific reports by deselecting all of them and manually going in and selecting the reports you'd like. Or you can go ahead and use the all selector box and select all the reports. Or you can leave those all selected and just simply select the reports that you actually want to print out or produce. Now keep in mind, there are some states that will allow you to export your data, especially for eDMR and NetDMR sites. If that is an available option, you will also have the ability to select export inside the produce window. And then you will have to, in addition to producing your reports from a printed or a PDF file, you'll also have to select the export icon. And when you select an export box to export a report, that icon will light up. If there's no available exports or no export boxes are selected, that icon will not, it will not light up and it will not be accessible. One of the things that's important to keep in mind from the Produce Reports window is you also have the ability now inside this window to verify the data for your reports. And you'll notice we have a column here that says Verify Data. Depending on the specific state report that you're using, you will have different options when you click this ... button. So this is a radio button. It's going to launch another menu for us for additional report data. Some of the things that you can do from here is you can verify exceptions. So the program will verify exceptions for you. But you can also verify exceptions manually, and once you have a populated report, it will also populate your data count, frequency, sample type. You can verify your comments. So any additional comments you would have for that particular reporting period, you could populate them here. And then if it's an option in your report, you can verify your preprint date as well. And you'll note as I go to different state reports, so this is just a standard New Jersey DMR. If I go to an Ohio 4500, I don't have the option of verifying my exceptions on that particular report, but I do have the options of verifying comments. And as you go through each report state, the options that are available for that particular report will appear in the verify comments window. And you can go ahead and you can navigate. Here you can see we can verify exceptions and verify comments. But that is now where you'll be able to do that inside Operator 10. So keep that in mind when you're producing your reports. Now when I produce these reports, we'll go ahead and see that we're greeted by a select print date. So you can modify the print date that appears on your report by selecting specifically what is available as far as a report date in your calendar. So if you go through here and you select a report date in your calendar, previous to the actual report date, that's fine. That's the date that will populate on your report. Okay. And we will go ahead and we'll just simply click OK, and that's going to bring up our output options here, where you can go ahead and print that to your printer, or if you want to produce that as a PDF file, feel free. I'm going to go ahead, and today I'm going to be producing everything in preview so we can view these reports. So you'll see these are blank DMRs. I just want to give you a feel for what these look like from our window here. So you can see this is just a blank New Jersey DMR, and then we can proceed through our list. You'll see this is an Ohio EPA 4500 form, and then we can navigate through the rest of our list and see our different DMRs. Some states will have a stock DMR like this, which isn't specific to the state, but many states do use a DMR, a discharge monitoring report, that looks like this. And then also, that's another stock DMR. And then we also can see here for the Commonwealth of Virginia, they do have a specific DMR that they're using. One thing to keep in mind is that we do try to update our report forms as we get them from the state. For this software update, we reached out to several states to get their latest forms. Many states responded. Some states were not very quick to respond. So if you do not have an updated form in 11.24, it's most likely because we didn't get that form back from your state in a timely fashion. But you will be able to produce your reports from the Produce Reports window. That was an overview of what the blank DMR reports look like. One thing to keep in mind when you are producing reports is that you also have the option of producing reports from your report list. So instead of selecting your report set, you can go into your report list, and this might be useful if you're not necessarily producing reports for a particularly defined report set. Maybe it's in between months and you just want to produce a specific report instead of going through your report set. You can go into your report list, and from your report list you'll be able to search through your grid, and you can find any reports based on name or whatnot that you want to report, and then you can identify those reports. You can also, by holding down the control key on your keyboard, multi-select or deselect reports from your report list. If you do select reports from the report list, you'll have to select the Print Selected Reports icon from the utility ribbon. Once you do that, you'll be greeted again by the same Produced Reports window. So those are two methods that you can produce your reports inside the Reporting Center. Another method that I want to show you is you can simply go to the Produce Reports icon. that is in the application ribbon. So if you bring that up, it's going to produce reports for whatever you currently have highlighted in your report set. So you can do that as well if you don't want to double click on your report set. And then there's a third option for producing your reports. And this is an option that many of you will probably find useful. And that will be to set up a dashboard icon to produce your reports. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize the reporting section for a moment to show you that feature. So here I am, I'm on my dashboard. When I'm on my dashboard, many operators and end users of the program like to set up dashboards and simply go and point and click to what they want to find in the program. And we encourage you to do that because it's really easy to navigate and locate what you're trying to open and what kind of data you're trying to enter into the program. You'll see that when I hold down the left button of my mouse and drag onto a dashboard space, I have a shadow outline here. This is an outline of where my dashboard's going to go. So when I lift up from the left button of my mouse, I'll be greeted by a Create Hotspot menu. From there, I can go ahead and create a hotspot that will allow me to directly produce reports from the dashboard. So for here, I'm just going to write in reports. You can, of course, define this description however you like. And then we have our image directory. This image directory is universal through the program. There's over 500 images in here. So you can select your image. You can even modify the scale of your image depending on how large or small you'd like your hotspots to be. And then the most important part when creating your hotspot is selecting what kind of data is going to be produced when you click on that hotspot. In this case, we're going to select report set, and then we're going to use our options button here at the end of the field to navigate out to a report set that we want to produce. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select our state DMRs that have actually been modified. So we saw previously some blank DMRs. Now we'll be able to review what those DMRs look like when they're populated with your data. So I'm going to select OK here. I'm going to click OK, and that's going to create a hotspot on my dashboard. And of course, I can click on this hotspot and drag it around and organize it however I like. But the most important feature is when I double click on this, it's going to produce a familiar window for us. This is our Produce Reports window. So you can produce your reports once they're set up in our Report Center directly from your hotspot. And this is great for end users that may not necessarily be familiar with the Reporting Center, how to modify or set up reports, but they will have to produce reports for submittal or review. So you'll be able to, from your hotspot, click on that icon once you've defined it, and then you'll be given a report date. And you can manually type in that date, or you can use the pop-out calendar if you'd like. Once you fetch your data, the program again is going to populate data for your reports. It's going to perform any calculations attached to those reports. Once again, don't forget that you can verify your data by clicking on the Verify button in the column. So in this case, I actually have data populated on these reports. So when I go to verify data, you'll see it will pre-populate some data for me. It's going to ask you which location parameter you want to verify exceptions for. So whichever location parameter you have highlighted, that would be the location parameter where those exceptions would be applied. And then you have the option here to verify your comments and then verify your preprint date as well, as we previously reviewed. So from here, once you've selected all that, you can define what you want to produce. You can even do your exports from here as well. So we'll do both of those. So what I want to do is I want to produce my reports, select my print date from the calendar, click OK, and then I'm going to be greeted by a preview window. When I populate my preview window, we'll now see that our DMRs have been produced, and you can see that we have DMRs with data. So this is what a populated DMR is going to look like based on the information you enter into the DMR. So it's taking the data from your location parameters that you've set up in the program, and it's populating those location parameters with data based on the requirements that we set up in the columns of the report. And we can just navigate through these quickly, and you'll see that even though the reports may look different based on your state, most of the data is very similar, if not the same. And again, when we go to setting up reports today, we always recommend that you have a copy of your most recent permit, because that will give you all the information you generally need to set up your state DMRs. And you can see we have our Ohio 4500, and then we can navigate through, and we have our Virginia form here as well. If there's not information populated for a particular requirement or cell inside the report, most likely it will be populated with asterisks. It will not be left blank. That's a way for the program to notify you that just no data was entered there. Some states like South Carolina require asterisks, so the report does populate asterisks when there's not data that has been entered for that particular cell. So we can review these, but this is what a populated DMR will look like. And we will, here in a few minutes, start setting up some DMRs so we can take a look at how we perform that inside the new version of Operator 10 in Synexus. So that's one way to produce your reports. Keep in mind, when you produce reports from this window, you can also log those as log documents. So we can click yes, and then the log documents feature is still available in Operator 10. And it will log all those printed off reports as log documents if you want to produce them later from the log document section. The next thing I want to take a look at is exporting. So for some states you will be exporting, whether it's an XML file or whatnot. You will have an export feature here. We'll go ahead and click that. Once we do that, the program will let you know that the export process has been completed. Just like the previous program, we do have a reporting folder that those XMLs are sent to. So I'm going to show you how to find your reporting folder that's been set up inside your database. So to do that, we're going to quickly navigate to our File tab. It's going to open our File window, which displays our application information here. But what we want to do is we want to access our open database. When we access our open database, a list of any databases you have set up will appear. Many of you will only have one or two databases. All you have to do is highlight the database that you're working in. And when you do that, you'll see there's some really important information that is populated down here under database properties. What we're looking at specifically is our reporting path. So the program will tell you where your reports are being saved at. Inside the new version of 11.24, you can actually modify this reporting path and create your own reporting path. The only caveat with doing that is you must make sure that that reporting path is shared over your network so that everyone who's accessing the program will be able to execute data in that file location. But in this case, we're just going to go ahead and highlight our reporting path, and we'll highlight that, and then you would go to your File Explorer window, and you would open a File Explorer window in this case, and you would go and navigate out to your reporting path. Now keep in mind, your reports inside your reporting path will be saved in the facility data directory, so it will be a data file with a number after it. If you have multiple facilities, you will see multiple data files. If you click on that data file, you will see you have an export file. So if you go in here, you will see where your export documents appear. Also for some states, so these are the documents that we exported for New York here. Some states will also have an XML file where they have an XML file they want you to upload to the program that will cross-reference your export file, and then you submit that to the website. If you do have an XML file that your state uses, you can put that here in your XML folder. So that's where that will be located. And also there's some other important information inside the database window, which includes, and we'll cover this briefly, some of your other file paths for different, if you have import files for labs or whatnot, you would see that there. But what I really want to focus on is your flow parameters, which are defined in the program, as well as your fecal parameters. Also, your concentration units are important as well. So these are important in reporting because the program does a lot of calculations for you. But in order for the program to calculate your loading in pounds correctly, or to be able to convert your UG per liter to milligrams per liter, you have to define those inside the database properties window. So once you click on your database and it's highlighted in blue, you can then access the properties window. When we pull up that properties window, there's a few areas that you may want to verify, and this is especially important if you're not getting the correct calculations. So you'll want to look at your flow parameters. So these are going to be your flow parameters that are used in formulas to calculate your concentrations. So it's important that these parameters are defined. The nice thing about operator 10, just like the previous version, in the new version as well, you can add additional parameters. So if you've set up a particular parameter for a location for your flow that's not in this list, you'll be able to click the Add application icon and then navigate out to your parameter list and see what flow parameters are available to you from your list. If there's not, any parameter that you added in the program should be populated in this list. And it's also important for concentration units to make sure that these are selected. So these are the multipliers that the program will use to convert your concentration units to different units of measurement. So those need to be defined. Most of these are defined by default, but sometimes they're not, or they've been modified. So I want you to be aware of these. Also for fecal parameters, if you have multiple fecal parameters, which many states now do, you can add additional fecal parameters from this database properties window. And the important thing about fecal parameters to keep in mind in reporting is that for many states, by default, they're using geometric mean. So geometric mean is going to use the central number in a geometric progression to determine that value. So if you had a series of numbers like 3, 9, and 27, it's going to pick the central number, which would be 9. So geometric mean is enabled for fecal parameters, and it's a requirement for most states now. So also we'll see under storage settings, this is where you can redefine your reporting path. Again, if you do decide to change your reporting path, please make sure you may have to contact your IT administrator and make sure that that's shared for everyone to access that reporting path. And if you need assistance with any of these database properties, please do not hesitate to call us in technical support if you don't feel comfortable modifying these yourself. Okay, so I wanted to show you that briefly. We'll go back to our database. So let's go back to our reporting section. So we went over all the multiple ways that you can produce your reports inside the new version of Operator 10 in Synexus. So the next thing that I want to proceed to is we've looked at our reporting path and how you can find your reporting path and change your reporting path, is setting up your state reports. So initially when you go to the report center and you're adding a new report or you're setting up a state report, you're most likely going to add a new report. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we will click on the Add New Report icon here. You'll see that it populates a list for creating new reports. And we touched on this in our last webinar, how to create reports, how to add new reports. So in this case, the nice thing about the updated version of Operator 10 is that before you really only had access to reports based on what state your facility was set up for. Now inside the program, you'll have the ability to not only select multiple facilities from here, from the drop-down menu, but also to add additional reports from other states if that would be applicable. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and get a pretty standard state DMR, which is the type of monitoring report most states use. So we'll go ahead and select that. Once I've clicked on the check mark next to that report, we'll hit save, and it's going to immediately take us to our properties window. So this is the logical next step that the program is going to make for you. It's under the assumption that if you're adding a new report, to operator 10 or Synexus that you're going to want to set up the properties of that report at the same time. Now, that is most likely going to be true. However, you may want to create a blank report or just start setting up your reports inside the program and organizing your report sets, and then go back and modify them later. If that's the case, you can simply name your report whatever you'd like, so you can change the name that's assigned to it from the name field up here, or you can let the program default and name your report for you. I have multiple Wyoming DMRs set up in this database, so what it's doing is it's creating a sequential number to assign a unique name to this report, and that is important. So you cannot have two reports with the same name set up inside the program. Once you've done that, you can modify the name here if you'd like. You can then go inside and start looking at the properties of the report and then start setting up the report. Or if you just want to keep a blank report and come back to it later, you can save it and then close it out, and then you'll be able to go to your report list later and go back inside the report and start modifying it. So when you add a new report, it will immediately take you to our editor so you can start setting up the properties for the report. But your other option is to go to your report list like I have and find the report that you've already added and start modifying that report if you'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and select this report. This was the report that we just added. And then from our application utility ribbon, we're going to select Edit Reporting. So this is going to produce the same window that we were greeted with when we added a new report. I want you to be aware of the different ways you can edit and modify your reports. So for many of you with existing reports, or if you have a permit change, you're going to be accessing your reports from the report list, and you're going to be selecting the edit icon here in the utility ribbon to edit your report. If you're adding a new report, it's a more simple process. The program's going to automatically greet you with the report setup menu. Once we're greeted with a report setup menu, you're going to see a graphic display of what the report looks like. And as we go through different sections of the report, you will see red boxing highlighting each section and defining what that section is for us. So you can see here we have a general information, and then when we go over here we have a reporting section, and then we have a facility location parameter definition. And then as we navigate through that, we start to set up our columns. One thing I recommend when you are setting up a new report is to go ahead and print out a blank DMR so you can have a better overview of how the report's laid out, and it'll give you a little more insight into how you may want to format and design your report. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and change the name of my report. So I want to go ahead and put in final. So once we edit this, this will be our final report. And again, when you open up the report setup window, you can modify this name later if you'd like. Once you've selected that, the next logical progression to make is going to be to set up the information inside the report. So it's going to ask some pretty basic information, such as the name of your facility, and you would start populating that. It's also going to ask for some important information like your permit number. So this is why it's really important to have your most recent permit available, because you'll be using that as a reference guide to set up your reports. And I can go ahead and enter a generic permit number here. And then it's going to ask for the address of your facility. So you'll go through and you'll populate that information. And then a discharge number. So for this particular report, if you have a discharge number, you could populate that number here. Some reports, as we'll see with our other report form, will actually be asking for a specific discharge location. And then form title, so that is additional information that you can populate. You can just put in if this is a standard DMR or if there's a particular piece of information you want to populate here. And then your facility, so if you have multiple facilities, this is where you would define your facility and then your location as well. You can define that as well if you have an outfall location that you're reporting for. Also, this is important if you're going to be setting up multiple pages inside the reporting section. You may have different locations. You could also might just have a final outfall location as well. So you can populate the required information in there. And this is an additional header information that you'd like to appear up here. And then attention, so if you're submitting this report to a specific regional director, you could just type in their name or whoever this report will be submitted to. And then if you're going to have multiple pages, this is where you can define the beginning of the page. So if this is going to be page 1. The next important section in reporting, so after we've defined the general information here, is going to be under the reporting section in this particular DMR. It's going to ask us what kind of reporting period we're looking at. So in other words, if you are setting up a monthly DMR, you're going to have a reporting period of 1 month. This is important because it lets the program know how far out it needs to start fetching data for. So for example, if you were setting up a monthly DMR, you would select 1 month, but many of you will probably have permit requirements that may be bi-monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and annually. You'll be able to set up multiple DMRs or reports based on those reporting requirements. So if you had a quarterly report, you would set up you would add another new stock or state appropriate report, and then you would select for that report the correct reporting months. The thing to keep in mind about operator 10 is it's always going forward. So if I'm reporting for, in this case, the month of November, I'm going to start November 1st, and it's going to go forward for that whole month. If I were doing a quarterly report in January, for March, I would start in January 1st, and then it would go forward through March and so forth. So that's how that works. And then, of course, the name and title of the reporting officer. So if this is a plant supervisor or however you set up your reporting requirements inside your facility. And then you would put in your telephone number for your facility. So a lot of this is going to be general information that you'll go ahead and populate. Once you have your general information populated in here, this is where we start setting up our data inside the report. So it's important to keep in mind when you're setting up your data that we've made some changes in the new version of the Reporting Center. For many of our old reports in the previous version, you had to add your location parameter per row. So you would go to each row, highlight it, and then go and add your location parameter. Go to the next row, highlight it, and add your location parameter. We've actually made that process a lot faster in this program. You will simply highlight your FLP definition, so your facility location parameters, and then you can add them all at once. So what I can do is once I've highlighted inside my graphic display of my report here, FLP definition, I can then go to the Add button below that, and it's going to allow me to start adding location parameters to my report. For this particular report, it's going to pull up a list of all the available location parameters based on the information in your database. So I can hold down the left button on my mouse and highlight multiple location parameters at once for this particular report. Now keep in mind, this is another reason why it's helpful to have a blank DMR in front of you, is you can count that you only have 7 columns per page. So if you highlight more than seven items, then it's going to create additional pages. So I just want you to be aware of that. But that's okay. We can go ahead and click OK. And you can see that it's populated those FLPs, those facility-based location parameters down here. What we then need to do is we need to organize these based on how we want them to appear on the report. So this is really up to you unless you have a specific permit requirement from your region or state. what you can do is you can highlight a particular location parameter and you can move it down or you can move it up. And you can do that for any of these. So once you do that, it will determine the order of where it populates in these rows on this state DMR. So again, you can just move it down or move it up depending on where you'd like it to appear. So, you might, for example, want to start out with your flow value and then maybe your fecal coliform, and we can move that up or move that down below our flow value. So that's important to keep in mind. So you'll want to set up how you want these location parameters to appear on your report. Once you've done that, you can then proceed to set up your concentrations and your loadings inside the report. So the first thing you're going to want to do is when you highlight the location parameter that you've added to your report is you're going to want to define your header text. That's the text that's going to appear here on the left side of the report, and that's going to allow you to determine what data you're actually reporting in this row. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You can manually type in whatever header text you'd like here. You can copy and paste in here if you have if you're working in a data view and you want to copy and paste over the header text from the data view, you can do that. Now keep in mind for some states, now this is a stock DMR, so you'll be submitting this manually, but for when we discuss later electronic DMR submittal, there may be some specific requirements for your header text, so you'll want to reference your permit and make sure that those are set up correctly. Some of the features that we make available for you is we have an options button here. So what that will do is that will populate a long list of parameter headers, and you can filter through this list if you want to try to find the one that would be appropriate. So when you filter through this list, you can type in a letter and it will immediately start looking at that letter. So in this case, I typed in F for flow, and then I want to find the right flow parameter for my report, and so I want to see if we have that here. So I have gallons per day, gallons per month, and I can just sort of look through here and find the correct parameter header that would be appropriate for what I'm looking at. So if I select this, it's going to populate some data for me. It's going to tell me that I'm looking at my flow rate, and it's going to tell me that this is a stock numerical number that's assigned to this flow rate based on the state database. So we have pre-selected those and populated those. Keep in mind, if this is a requirement for your electronic submittal, you'll want to verify that that code is correct. And then we also put in effluent gross value. You can also, if you click this exclamation button here, it'll cycle through all the flow rate information that's available. So you can do raw sewage influent, it'll go through percentage removal, effluent gross again, and then it'll just cycle through what's available under that flow rate so you can see what your options are. You can also manually just type in your location parameter if you wanted. So if I didn't want to use that, I could just copy and paste. So I could copy flow MGD, and if I put that right here, you'll see that that value will populate for me. All right. So once you've done that, you can continue to do that for each of your column headers. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to see your data and know where your data is being classified in the report. So I'll just go through a few of these and define them for us so that when we define these, they'll appear on our report and we'll know what we're looking at. Now, once we've populated that information, your next step is going to be setting up your calculations inside the report for these parameters based on whatever your permit requirements are. So the next thing I want to take a look at is our final flow in million gallons a day. Our first column value we're going to see here is a loading value. So you can go ahead and populate information for that if you need to. So you will have the option of selecting based on your permit requirement from our different calculations available for the average flow value. You can select from our drop-down menu here. So for average, we have several different calculations that are available for you to select from. Depending on what your particular plant supervisor or region or state requires, that will help you determine what calculation you're going to want to apply. So in this case, what I want to take a look at is I can do an average weekly, continuous, Saturday rule, Wednesday rule, first of the month, full weeks, or if you were setting up an hourly value on a report, you could get an average for those hourly values. If you're not familiar with what these terms are referencing as far as the type of calculation they're performing, there is an information guide available here inside the program. So you can go and you can select our guidance icon, and that's going to launch our help file. So that help file is going to be a great resource, especially for those of you who haven't set up a lot of reports before. It will sort of walk you through the process as a reference guide. As you can see, it starts to define how you do everything for this report. So it's going to cover, setting up the reporting information. It also, so it'll let you know if you don't have any discharge to be reported, you can select that option from reporting, as well as defining your reporting timeline, whether it's monthly, quarterly, etc. And then it went through the FLP definition. But one of the important things I want to show you here is at the bottom of this, it defines some of our formulas for you. So it'll let you know what continuous and first of the month and Saturday rule and Wednesday rule, what those actually mean. And it also will tell you that the average calculations for fecal parameters use a geometric mean when it's properly defined in the database properties. So that's what we previously discussed about your database properties and defining your flow and fecal coliform parameters. So that reference guide is available in the reporting section. We make it easier to find by hitting your guidance here. You also have the option of hitting your F1 button, which is still a feature available in 11.24, and that is our location-based help guide, so it will navigate to where you're at in the program to try to find help for you. So that's a available option as well. But what you're going to want to proceed to is selecting a calculation. Now you can select just an average, so a standard average calculation. You can also select, if you have a particular requirement, you can select whatever that requirement is, and the program will do the calculation for you. The next option you have is if you have a permit number for this particular location parameter, and again, this comes more into play for electronic submittal, but some states may require you to populate a permit number for this particular location parameter. You could populate that here. And then you're going to want to select what your reporting requirement is. So in this case, we're just going to select a 30-day average. But you'll see, depending on what values we're reporting, we have a long list of options here to select from. And we populate this list based on what the state permit requirements are. Okay. You also have the ability to enter some alternative text in the field if you'd like. So that would be user specific. If there was something specific to your facility or a particular region of the state, we do have the ability to add some additional text there. And you'll see as we navigate to our next column, we're looking at a loading for maximum value. You can then choose just a standard maximum, or if you had a specific requirement, you could also select a maximum there. Once you've selected that and you've selected your reporting period here, then you can go through and you can do this for each column. So our next column is going to be our concentration, and then we're going to select, in this case, if it's a requirement, a minimum value, to do a minimum weekly average value. And then we also have an average column set up for concentration as well, where you'll be able to go in and select from your calculations here. One thing I will show you that is germane and important for some of you is if you have custom calculations set up in your database that you want to apply to your DMRs or your state reports, we have implemented the ability to do that inside the new version, as well as that ability was available in the old version. So what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to select from this options button, and then it will bring up a list of any custom formulas that you have set up in the program. So you would have to write a custom formula into the database, and then once you've saved that to your list of formulas, you can then go through and select. I have, for this purposes of this webinar, created an average daily loading custom formula, and I can select OK, and it will apply that average daily loading custom formula here. So you have the option from selecting any of the available calculations that come stock, which for most of our users are more than enough, but you also have the ability to add custom formulas based on your, whatever specific calculation requirements you have. Also, if you need help writing those custom formulas, we will try to assist you with that process somewhat. We do charge to write all your custom formulas, but we will help you set up custom formulas and show you the process of creating those. And then next we have our additional column for our maximum concentration on this DMR, and you can select whatever particular calculation would be applicable. Then again, you have your option down here to select how if that's a max 7-day average, max weekly. You can select based on whatever your permit requirements are there. The next thing you'll see, one thing that I skipped over between our loading and our concentration columns is our unit definition. So this is where you define your units for each of your location parameters, and it's also where you can define your decimal placement. So we get several calls where people are concerned about the number of decimal placed values on the report. It's too long. You can modify that inside your report properties. From this particular column, I can reduce or add additional decimal placement for a value. Also, I do need to assign a particular reporting value or unit value to my parameter. So in this case, I have a long list of unit values that I can select from, and once I select that, it will populate that for me. And then you also will have the ability over here, after you go through your concentration setups, to select your units for those as well as the number of decimal places. So you'll do the same thing and select your correct unit value here. Okay, your next option is going to be to determine your reporting frequency and type. So based on your lab, you will determine your sample frequency. Based on your permit, your lab will sample based on whatever permit requirement you are under by the state, and you can define that here in this field. So however often, if you're providing a concentration sample, for example, you can select how often you're testing for that from this menu here. And you can see you have several options here. And then your permit requirement, again, this is the permit requirement that is issued to you, and you can go ahead and you can select that permit requirement here. Sample type, so you will most likely have to define your sample type. So what type of sample are you doing to meet your permit requirement? And then again, you will want to populate what your permit requirement is for sampling. So once you start to save that data, you'll see that you'll be able to save this up here. So you can save any changes that you're making inside the report properties. And then you'll want to perhaps preview your report as you start building it to see how data looks. So you can always produce a report if you want to get a preview of what it looks like based on the values that you've populated inside of it. And that'll give you an overview of how your report's coming along. It's also useful just to make sure that everything's looking correctly. Also, you will be able to populate the data in your database and make sure that your calculations are being applied correctly in the program based on the calculation specification that you selected. For those of you that use Excel and you're transitioning into Operator 10 or Synexus reporting, it can be a little frustrating because Excel may calculate average values differently, or it may not necessarily calculate a geometric mean for fecal. So you just have to be conscious of that. And I always recommend clients reference their permit and see what the specific calculation the state's looking for. Some states do have actually very specific calculations. I know the state of Colorado, for example, they have a rather unusual way of calculating some things. So that's always going to be your first reference. And of course, we're here to assist you to make sure that you can get your calculations set up correctly to get your calculated values. But that's just an overview of what your report will start to look like as you build it. For the sake of time, I'm not going to rebuild this whole report, but you can see that you will want to take your time, make sure that you're populating accurate information. You can see where our name, our address, all of that information that we inputted appears here on your DMR. And you can save this as a log document if you want to recreate it from your log documents. Or in this case, I'm just going to select no because it hasn't been finalized. The nice thing is once you start setting up a report, you can save it and come back to it later if you get interrupted or you're not quite sure how to proceed. So it will save your changes and you can start back where you left off. I'm setting up your different columns here. The next thing I want to take a look at is a different type of report. So not all of you are going to have stock DMR reports or even monthly reports that look like that, but the process is very similar. So in this case, I want to go ahead and close out our report list, go back to our reporting center. I actually want to add a new report. So in this case, we'll just look at a stock Ohio 4500. This report is set up differently, but it's also set up for electronic submittal, so I want to show you that as well. Okay, there we go. So now we're back into our report setup screen. The next thing we want to proceed with is setting up the report just like we did before. So it's important to note when you highlight different sections of the report icon, again, you get red outlines for each section that you can add and modify information for. Some general property sections are kind of hidden. They're all the way up here in like the left-hand corner, or I've even seen them all the way over here in the right-hand corner. So you may think this is the only area you need to modify information, but if you go a step up, there's actually a general properties window which you'll be greeted with right here. And what's important about that is you can select your report style for some reports. So for example, we have just a stock Ohio EPA 4500, but also we can set this up for electronic submittal. So I can select that, and it's going to change some of my options in the properties of the report. So that's why it would be important to select that if I do want to set this up for electronic submittal. And then I can go to my general properties, and I may admit this may be formatted a little differently depending on your state, but the process is the same. So in this particular case, it's asking for a particular station code, which I can assign, and then it does ask for the location. So any location parameters for a report of this type will have to be attached to any parameters for a report of this type will have to be attached to whatever specific location you select. So here it's pulling up all my different locations. I can select OK. It's going to populate the name of my location. You can overwrite that if you need to. Here you can submit the reporter name. So whoever's submitting the report, you'll be able to populate that here as well, such as the name of your facility, or if you have a particular individual or lab that's submitting this report, you can just go ahead and you can populate that information here. So you can just put their name in there. And then you would put the name of your facility right here. And then, of course, you would populate all of your address information in here as well. And then you would enter your application number, which, keep in mind, can be different than your permit number. Sometimes people get confused by that, but I would reference your permit because it will have your application number on it, and then your county and so forth. Your reporting lab, so whatever lab you're using to analyze your samples, the district you're in, the analyst. Some reports require the name of the analyst, so if you had a particular analyst, you would put their name here, and then the title of who's submitting the report, so whether it's a plant supervisor or whatever that title would be, you would populate that information here. So again, we're populating general information just like we did on the other stock report. This is just it's just in a different format based on the state. So the next thing we would then do is we would select our columns. So you can see in this report style, the column headers are at the top. So instead of having rows, they're creating columns for us to populate our data. And you will see some other states that have a report similar to this. When you highlight on your first column, it's going to tell you it's blank, column 1. You'll be able to select your parameter. Now, the difference with this type of report style is we've already selected our location in the database. So when you select parameter, it's only going to populate a list of parameters that are available at that specific location. So that's something to keep in mind. When you do select your list of parameters, you can define the order that the parameters appear in instead of having an up or down option, or even having the option of adding all of your parameters at once. You will have to individually go through each column and define your parameters. So as you click, you're going to define your parameters. Especially important for electronic submittal, you will have a parameter code based on this this particular parameter that will be referenced when you submit this to the website. So this has to be exact. You can always find this information on your permit. And then again, you will determine your sample type, and you'll also determine the frequency of how often you have to sample this. Also, if you have any MDLs that are set up in your permit, you would have to submit those here as well. Once you set these in the properties of the report, they'll remain there. So you only have to define them once. If you don't have any MDLs, you can leave that blank. And then you would proceed to do that for each parameter in the report. What's unique about this particular report is you don't have the options for calculations like you do on the other report. But I want you to understand that even though reports may come in different styles and formats based on your specific state, the process of setting up the properties in the report is always very similar. And then you can define your units here by writing those in. Again, you may not have the option to select from header data. You may just simply have to populate your header data, or in some of the reports, based on the report style, it will populate the header data for us, and we can go through and we can select our sample type as well as our frequency type. And then if you had any MDLs, you would be able to select that as well. So once you've done that, you can save that information, and then you can go and start producing your report based on your reporting date, and start taking an overview of your report. And you'll see a preview of it. Let me zoom in a little bit here so you'll see that your report may populate data differently based on your state, or you may not even be using a daily monitoring report. You may have a transit report, like in the state of New Jersey or something like that, that's required. Again, if it's a stock state report, it'll be in the database. The properties inside the report, the process of setting up is very similar. You have to just go through the setup process and start populating the information that will appear on the report. The program will do the rest for you. It will fetch your data from the database with our fetch application icon here, and it will start compiling that data and applying any calculations that are attached to that data inside the report. So that's important to keep in mind. So once you're done with any property changes, be sure to save it. And then you can close that out. Again, I can go to my report set to produce my reports. I've already modified all these reports for our view, so we can overview those really quickly. Let me fetch my data here. And again, we can produce, and we can also export like we discussed previously. And then you select your print date from the calendar, and once you do that, you'll start to preview your reports. And just like before, we have all of our reports now populated with data. Now, keep in mind, some reports may also have alpha codes. So if you have a sample type that's too numerous to count or whatnot, that will populate in the report as well. So depending on whatever requirement you have, here you can see the Ohio 4500 we were just on with more data that's been populated in it, as well as a stock DMR with all the data populated and set up inside of it. So we've selected all of our calculations for quality or loading, and then we've also, quantity or loading. And then we've also selected our calculations for our concentrations. We've defined our units for each of those, our decimal placement, our frequency of analysis, our sample, and our sample type. So all of that has been defined in the report, and when we produce our reports, that will all appear there for you. And then down here, this is where we would put in the name of our supervisor or the plant supervisor that will sign off on this report, and then be responsible for all the data that's contained in the report when they submit it to the state. So that's a brief overview of what the reports look like when the properties have been modified and they've been customized to display the data based on whatever your permit requirements are. So that is our webinar on setting up custom report, or setting up the properties in our reports. I will briefly show you that you do have the ability inside the program to create custom reports. This isn't something that many users will do on their own, but if you go into your report list, you'll notice that you have a utility icon down here. So this will allow you to make some modifications and changes to some reports that you have inside of the program. But you also will have the ability for some of our report sets to add a custom report. So you could add a new report, and you can navigate, and if you wanted to add a custom report from our stock reports. So keep in mind, this is going to be your state reports up here, and we're going to have additional stock reports available down here. If you wanted to start building a custom report, you could select it from the list. You can add it, so you're going to save it, and then it's going to bring you into what looks like a report properties menu, which it is. But with a custom report, you're really setting up everything in the report by hand. So this report is something that isn't being serviced by any of our stock reports or by a data view. It's something outside the scope of that, where you need to create some customized data for producing. And in order to do that, you will have to go into your template builder. When I launch this template builder, you'll see that it launches a program that we use called List and Label. And from here, I have to start building a report from scratch. This is a really time-consuming process, and it takes a good deal of knowledge to start mastering the ability to do that. We build custom reports for clients as an additional charge. So if you wanted us to send you a quote for a particular custom report you'd like to create, we can do that on your behalf. Or if you have the time and resources to work with our custom report creator, List and Label, you can go in here and start creating a custom report for yourself. We do have available for reference, and I'll close this out, and show you that under the File menu, when we go out to our manuals, there is a Report Designer manual available as a PDF file. And what that manual does is it's the designer manual for List and Label, and it will go through a detailed process of how you can create and set up custom reports. This will take some practice and time to do successfully, but it will outline the procedures and processes for doing that. So I just wanted to end on that note and let you know that that feature is available inside the software for you to implement if you choose to do so. So I'm going to close these out, and then that is going to pretty much conclude this webinar over modifying report properties and producing reports inside Operator Tenants and Nexus version 11.24.